So, well, thank you, Rod, and the Kona Science Cafe for the kind invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here and kind of share some of the experiences that I have had with nanomedicine along the line. As I said, I'm a pharmaceutical scientist by training, so with more focus on drug delivery. So pretty much like the last 15 years, I would say I've been right from undergrad in some capacity working on drug delivery and more focused on nanomedicine now, how we can use it for improving delivery of the drugs. And along the way, you will see that some of the drugs that we actually have, which are based on nanomedicine, right? So it's no longer a fancy, just a lab-based science. We actually have commercial products based on nanomedicine right there. So just gonna kind of, I think the talk is like, trying to give just an overview because I wasn't sure I had heard that the audience is pretty, like from different backgrounds. So I try to put in some very basic. So pardon me if it sounded like, redundant, but I just wanted to kind of include that so that we come to the same page and kind of move on. And I've included some of the things that I did just so that I can, convince you at least in part that with the stuff that I have, that nanomedicine can make a real impact. Okay. All right, feel free to stop me at any point of time. It's probably more of a discussion and rather than like an official talk. I think that's how I would like it. All right, so just quick background. I finished my undergrad as well as PhD back in India. I'm pharmaceutical drug delivery scientist by training there. After that, I've been around a couple of places, Western, Creighton, and Hopkins before I moved out here last year to set up my own lab and be independent PI and trying to get nanomedicine. So all along, even from undergrad, nanomedicine or drug delivery has been the focus, and that is one of the fields I'm really, really excited about, passionate about, and I'm happy to get this opportunity to share some of the experiences here. Okay, all right. Okay, so just brief outline. I'm gonna give some introduction about nanomedicine, nanomedicine in general, some of the current products that may be. But the focus today is mainly on one of the areas that I got really involved in at Hopkins, which is going to be one of the areas of my research even at UH level. So how you could use nanomedicine for very localized drug delivery or localized treatment of bladder cancer, which something I got involved in 3 years ago, and it's been really fascinating journey. And natural products, I come from India. Natural products is huge there, just as they are in Hawaii, right? So this is one of the reasons I worked on this quercetin, which is one of the polyphenols in my PhD, and I'm kind of getting back into natural product research as I set my lab here as well. So that was one more reason I thought, this would be, although this was done long ago, almost 10 years ago, I would say, but this is something I thought would give you a flavor of how nanomedicine can also be useful for natural products. Okay. All right, so I know we all keep on hearing nano. I'm sure everybody has everybody knows, but it's still this diagram really caught my eye just to how to explain nanotechnology or nano-sized nano to general audience. And the cool thing is that, so the nanoscale, we keep on hearing about our part nano and all that, but visually speaking, where would the nano lie, right? So your baseball is about...
Yeah, it reflects off the screen.
Oh, I see. All right, well, it doesn't matter. Your baseball is around 100 million nanometers, so you can imagine, and your water molecule, if it were to occupy space in 3D, it's about 0.1 nanometer, right? So you can imagine like the size difference. The nano that we typically, at least in the pharmaceutical world that we deal with, are somewhere around, virus to bacteria. So I'm gonna show that a little bit later again. But just to kind of like clear the size difference. So a nanoparticle, so if you just wanted to see the scale, like the ratio of the nanoparticle to football is the same ratio of the football to the size of Earth. So you can imagine how just to get the context of the scale right. So they are very tiny. I found this another cool diagram. It's just like they have like a bunch of different comparisons, probably done by some people in New Zealand because they have comparison of donut with New Zealand. So like your nanoparticle is the size of football. Then it's a very nice comparison. The whole idea is just to give you an idea how tiny they are, and that's why they're special. And we'll see while I go along that how some of the things can be really changed or altered when you go to the nanoscale. Okay, I hope the size comparison of all right. Okay, so as I said earlier, the nanoparticles that we typically deal with are in the size range of about 100 nanometers, at least in one dimension. So it could be a diameter, it could be a length. Typically, that's a classical dimension that we would be looking at. So they are more like viruses, and as you can imagine, viruses obviously they are more biological. They have their own machineries, and they are able to get inside the cells. You can imagine if you have something similar to that size, and if you functionalize it well and properly, then you could potentially harness some desired outcome from that, right? That is kind of some of the things to keep in mind. There are some exceptions, obviously. I mean, the scale is not set at 100 nanometers. You will see certain pharmaceutical products, at least in our arena, whereby you may have like a little bit larger dimensions. But the whole idea is that you keep them in a defined size range so that you can get the nano advantage that we're looking for. Okay, just to clear the scale again, the nanoparticles, if you take your cells, about typical cells in the body, they can vary in between 10 to 100 microns, right? So the nanoparticles are obviously much smaller than that. So essentially, they can get inside the cells if you engineer them properly. But at the same time, they're also special because if you just consider small molecules, your drugs, if you consider small molecules in the 3D space, the space, for example, aspirin, or or even you say Tylenol, right? The space that would occupy in the 3D is about 0.5 nanometer, whereby your typical nanoparticle would be 100 nanometers, right? So the interesting point I'm trying to bring out here is that although they are tinier than the cells, so that they can get inside the cells and they can deliver cargoes or deliver drugs or any other moieties, they're still, the reason they are able to deliver the drugs because they are considerably bigger than actual drug molecules, right? So this is the size difference, whereby because they're bigger, they can, if you can engineer them properly, you can carry almost 100,000 drug molecules on an average. If you engineer, say, a nanoparticle with 10% of the loading of the drug, or like the molecule, any cargo, essentially the general rough math is about you can carry a considerable amount of drug molecules inside the particle, and these molecules can now be delivered in an efficient fashion using nano. That is where, at least from the perspective of drug delivery, that is where our interest lies, that we could use them as a nano. They're tiny so that they can get inside, but they're also big enough so that they can carry the drugs and make them better and make them, to the point. Yes?
What is the vehicle, the nano vehicle that carries the drug?
Right, so I'm coming to that.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah.
But it's some porous molecule because your 10% loading is presumably by weight.
Right. So there is one example that I'm going to show is that, 10% is on an average we typically like to achieve, or even more. But we have some types of nanoparticles where you could literally have drug itself in nano, so that you almost have close to 100%. You're not trying to look at any carriers. So there are a lot of different possibilities, and I have a slide there where you can see different materials that we can use for nano, including just pure drugs. And there are actually, I'll show you that in a couple of slides, but we actually have products based on that as well. Okay, stay tuned. All right, so at least from the drug delivery perspective, or even in other cases, so why is the nanoscale important? I think this was one of the really cool diagrams that I found on a government website. So if you just look at this, if you have a 1 centimeter cube, and if you just go on, theoretically, if you just go on dividing into 1 millimeter cubes and further to 1 nanometer cube, so your total mass is the same, right? It's just same 1 centimeter cube, and now you have theoretically 60 million centimeter square surface area. So imagine from total 6 centimeter square surface area, if you divide them into nanoscale, the dramatic increases in the surface area is one of the reasons why nano is really efficient. And drugs and even other cases, like there have been sufficient evidences that at that scale, essentially the molecular properties could also change. again, it could be drugs, it could be certain. For example, carbon. Carbon obviously is not typically considered to be a good conductor of electricity. But if you say carbon nanotubes, because they are specifically engineered, there are several papers where we can see that they are absolutely good conductors or superconductors of electricity, right? So that is where the nano advantage, once you go to the molecular level, once you go to the nanoscale, increased surface area is obviously one of the big advantages that we're looking at, especially for drug delivery, because what it means is that with this greater surface area, you have much larger driving force for the absorption. So imagine you have like one tablet, and imagine you have like nanoscopic tablets. Essentially, that nanoscopic tablet, because of the higher surface area throughout your gastrointestinal tract, is going to get absorbed much, much better compared to just like a big blob. Okay, so that is one of the reasons why drug delivery scientists are interested in that this dramatic surface area, especially for oral pills or even local delivery, essentially translates to better absorption because of the nanoscale. And that is where you can get that enhanced performance from nanomedicines. Okay? So just brief, again, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time, but nano is something that's been going on for essentially, I really found this diagram cool. Right from the genesis of the universe, you have nanoscale. It's just that it took us a long time to figure out that these things mean nanoscale. So I found this particular example really interesting. Where they had a stronger steel, material science has exploited nanotechnology to a great extent to create such a large array of functionalities into materials, and they found out eventually that this was more tougher because it had a nanoscale carbon nanotube. So again, nano for different fields brings in different advantages. For us, we are interested in, can we make things better? Can we make drugs better? Can we reduce the side effects? But I just found this diagram as very cool. At least in the modern context, we consider Dr. Feynman as the key person, or he's famous. There's a famous statement by him, there's a plenty of room at the bottom. So that is where pretty much started revolutionize the nanotechnology. It was there. Electronics is probably materials and electronics is probably the second place where nanotechnology has been used for a lot of time. Again, I'm not electrical engineers can probably obviously point out even further, but the reason we are able to bring down our computers smaller and smaller, our DVDs, we can increase the mass storage. Part of it is definitely because of nanotechnology, because you could engineer materials in such a way that they can store more capacity and in a finite manner, right? We have applications in the food, we have applications in conductors and a lot of other fields. I just thought that this would be a good area, and there are continuous additions that are happening. For pharmaceuticals per se, and I could say actually incidentally even for cosmeceuticals, so nanotechnology kind of entered, it was being researched for almost since 1950s or even earlier, but we actually had first pharmaceutical product back in 1998. So first pharmaceutical product as well as cosmeceutical product based on nanotechnology dates back to 1998. So I just, again, want you to know that this is something that we are dealing with for a long time, and we are still learning and we are perfecting. And there are still newer avenues that we can go for. Just another quick examples from routine practices. Actually, one of the very common you'll see is your sunscreens. For a long time, they have been using sunscreens which are in a nanoscale just so that they can give you better sunblock. So imagine if you have a nanoscale sunblock, or simple titanium dioxide or now zinc oxide. If you have micron size bigger blobs, essentially the surface area for the skin covered would be definitely not as efficient. If you have nanoscale, whereby there are not many gaps as well as the surface area is higher, so that you're going to get better sunblock, right? Similar principles are obviously applied for drug delivery or a lot of other places, just to give you an idea. And from here on, obviously, I'm going to talk about something specific to medicine or pharmaceuticals. Okay. Just as I said, nanomedicine is a reality. As I said, we've had our first nano product back in 1998. Of course, it's special, it's complicated, so the development is definitely not as rapid as a lot of other things, but it is very, very much there. Right now, we have about 20 products based on nanotechnology, which are approved by FDA. And well, I mean, I put this because this was the classic depiction of nanomedicine, where you have this nanobots, and I'm sure we are getting there. We're not far away from these kind of things where we can literally engineer. There are already nanomotors which material scientists are engineering so that you can go to specific places and sense particular things. But right now, what we have is something more based on small molecules with right engineered materials so that you can have different types of nanotechnology-based products. So essentially, nanomedicine, is applications of nanotechnology in medicine. And Doxil was the first product that came in 1998. So this was the first product that came in the market. And thereafter, that pretty much revolutionized, especially the field of nanomedicine per se. And after that, there have been so many trials, so many attempts. One of the things that is there is that because it's nano, because it is special, but it also requires more precision, more control. The rate of translation has definitely been slower. The amount of products that we research on, the amount of products that are actually approved by the FDA, there is a stark difference there. And that is, as a pharmaceutical scientist, I think that is one of the challenges that we still have. How do we bring in, if you see electronics or other materials, like the amount of output as well as the functionalities that they can add in is way faster compared to the medicine. Just because you're catering to two totally different functionalities, but I just wanted you guys to be aware of. Now, as I said earlier, so this guy is actually another revolutionary product by Janssen, whereby you essentially have almost pure drug. Okay, so and I'm going to talk about these drug nanoparticles in my next slide. That's the reason I kind of chose that. So, as you guys pointed out, that if you use materials, then maybe there is a limit on how much you can load inside the materials, which is useful in some ways. But if you really want to deliver the right dose and get the longer lasting effect, then essentially you could figure out, can we make this drug itself into nano with just suitable FDA approved materials so that we could get maximal loading of the drug as well as potentially longer benefits. So this guy here is actually a nano-enabled, just pure drug with some additives into nano, which is injected into the muscle, and it's for patients who are undergoing psychosis. So the idea is that you engineer this in such a way that essentially one shot would give you levels for almost a month or even 3 months now. So that is a cool thing about how you can essentially apply nanotechnology to have more patient compliant, more longer lasting delivery system. I didn't really list a lot of things here. I also come from a field of HIV prevention, and right now there are actually drug trials that are ongoing, almost in late phase 2, whereby Janssen or Gilead as well as GSK, they're coming up with products whereby you can inject anti-HIV drug, especially to at-risk patients, and they are protected for almost 3 months or even more. So these are, again, yes.
So does that work because the nanoscale particles are bigger and have less surface area than the molecules themselves?
So yes, so if you just consider the drug molecule in a solution form, essentially the nanoparticles are bigger. So they're going to essentially fall apart slower, but at the same time, because they're nanoscale, they're not just going to sit there in the muscle. They're going to disseminate much better compared to the bigger size particles, right? So, in theory, you could also inject bigger particles there and essentially have a longer lasting impact, but it doesn't necessarily work all the time. So that's why nano there helps you to get it to the places where it's supposed to be for a longer lasting period, but at the same time, it is much better than having just a simple injection of a drug, whereby you will see immediate effect, but it may not necessarily last that long. Right? Okay. All right. So yeah, I think obviously there are a lot of different possibilities, and you'll see. I'm just gonna kind of like highlight the advantages again, just so that why nanomedicine is still important, why I still have about 20 products, at least 20 products, is that as a patient or as a healthcare professional, all the major goal for the healthcare professional is that you want to maximize the effects of the drug, right? So that you can potentially reduce the dose as well as reduce the healthcare-related costs, and you want to minimize the side effects associated related to the drug, and you want to overall figure out a way to get where it's supposed to go, right? So, for example, like if you have arthritic pain, then ideally you would want things to go specific to the side rather than just getting the whole body exposed, right? So, nanotechnology definitely helps you with most of these aspects. So, the advantage typically is that, well, it improves, there are several studies, it shows that it improves efficacy mainly by increasing the availability of the drug to the body, because of the nano, your drug is going to get better absorbed into the body compared to your bigger size particles, and that essentially will translate into better efficacy, right? And that better efficacy would actually in turn lead to reduction in the dose, because if you have a nano Tylenol, you may not need to take 500 milligrams. You might be okay with just 200 milligrams. So that in turn also saves you, total healthcare costs, right? And if you have drug dose-related side effects, essentially it also leads to reduction in any dose-related side effects. There are other means by which nanomedicine can help. There are a lot of drugs that we have, molecules which are very unstable, very labile, very difficult to figure out a way to deliver in an effective manner. And your nanotechnology could, because especially, and that is where if you have something carrier-based nanotechnology, whereby you can put the drug inside these carriers, properly engineered carriers, you could essentially improve their stability, you can reduce their metabolism so that they stay longer and eventually give you longer lasting impact. The another important point is that there are certain drugs where you actually, they are effective, but they can also be very toxic if you just exceed the dose by very minuscule, right? So these are drugs which are called as very tricky drugs, where you need a very finely, precisely engineered delivery mechanism so that you deliver only drug amount which is tolerated by the body without getting to the toxic level. So such drugs can also be repurposed with the help of nanomedicine. And I'll just show you. So this guy, this is an antifungal drug which is also very, very toxic, but very, very effective. One of the gold standards that you have for antifungal therapy, which could be engineered in such a way that so that you can have better tolerability of this drug. And yes.
Do you also do work in a field which would relate to that, having excess nanoparticles being shed while being medicated and in the wastewater stream? Do you actually do science and work on how to destruct nanoparticles? Because nanoparticles in general in the environment are kind of an incompatible thing.
Right. So at least for the pharmaceutical context, these nanoparticles are made from biodegradable materials. So essentially, the material engineering in such a way that they would essentially degrade by themselves, mostly inside the body itself. So you don't necessarily have any environmental impact.
Hopefully.
No. I mean, we engineer that way so that, because if they don't, essentially our body is going to be a dumping ground, which that is a worst nightmare of a healthcare professional, right? So we take an effort so that we engineer them in such a way that essentially they are degraded inside the body. There are, however, some examples whereby people use metals. So I agree with that, whereby it may be difficult to, especially, but a lot of the times our body will kind of take care of with the metabolism. There have been some trials or examples with, gold or some of the other things, or quantum dots, whereby people use other, metals which are not necessarily biocompatible or environment friendly, but from what I understand is that there is also research ongoing to that effect. Thanks. Right. Okay, and last one, last one is basically if you understand materials well, if you design materials well, and with more understanding of biology, more understanding of the targets, you can even surface engineer these nanoparticles in such a way that so that they'll seek out a specific site in the body, so that you don't. which in turn will help you to reduce the side effects of the drug, off-target effects of the drug. Because if your liver is affected, you ideally want your drug to go specifically to the liver, preferably not to any other place. Most of the cases, right? So nanotechnology, in certain cases, if you can engineer them well, they could actually get to the target, to the liver specifically, and minimize exposure to the other parts of the body. So there are a lot of potential advantages about nanomedicine, and that's part of the reason why pharmaceutical scientists have been pouring in efforts and money and everything all throughout the years, so that the goal is that we make drugs better, we make them less harmful, and maximize their efficacy. Okay. All right. So I think, from this point on, maybe you could just enough. I think